what sort of happened growing up that has made you who you are today?
I kind of break it down from the beginning, really. So,
Tyler Hill, MMA fighter.
He's a YouTuber with over 70,000 followers.
And CEO, all by the age of 22.
What was it about fighting or MMA in particular that made you interested in choosing that over basketball, over these other sports and other options that you had?
I think it was the control. With fighting, I recognized, man, this is all on me.
What's that moment like when you walk out into the arena in front of a bunch of people for the very first time?
It now is the feeling that I constantly chase.
How long do you see yourself fighting professionally? What would you say is the most difficult part of running your own company at 22 years old?
I always knew I would be here, but I never thought I would be here. In the sense that I knew I could do this. Like deep down in my heart, like I knew I could do this. The idea that I could do it or that I would do it was kind of like that's crazy.
Your channel has over 70,000 subscribers. How did you do that? Nothing about what you just described sounds easy. Across these years, you've learned so much about YouTube, the industry, making content. What's something that you would go back and tell yourself?
Two things. Okay. Thing number one.
Tyler Hill, thanks for being here, man. I want to get to know you a little better in this conversation. I've known you for a couple years now, but there's a lot of your childhood and your backstory that I just don't know. So I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood? What sort of happened growing up that has made you who you are today?
Yeah, I felt a weird one, honestly. It's weird. It's like a normal childhood, but also a weird childhood just because like sequence of events. But so I wasn't actually born in Lafayette. I was born in Berwick, Louisiana. It's about an hour and a half from Lafayette, but it's like absolutely tiny. It's a great place. Don't get me wrong. It's just really small and there's just not a lot to do. And so I was there until I was about 14, I think right before my freshman year. And then kind of throughout that time while I was there, I just, I had my issues. Smaller town, kid with a lot of energy. It's just not the best mix. And so throughout the time I was there, although I had good experiences, like playing basketball. I wasn't good at basketball, but I played basketball. In middle school, and then obviously playing like kind of like for a little local travel team and stuff like that. That was a good, and but at the same time, I would kind of get in issues at school. I was kind of a bit of a scrapper in elementary, so I got a couple fights, and throughout that time, my parents were like, "Yeah, we need to kind of control this energy a little bit." So kind of about 10 years old or so, 9 years old, they put me into MMA. It was jiu-jitsu and karate and kickboxing, and that was kind of a good thing. That was a good source. And so a lot of the bad things from, earlier on in elementary school kind of got funneled into a good source of fighting. And around 14, man, we moved over to Lafayette. We realized that there's just more opportunity here. My dad lives here. We were like, yeah, let's just pack it up and go and just kind of see what opportunities pop up. And, as soon as I got here, I realized that the basketball scene wasn't for me anymore. I was like, yeah, we're not gonna waste time. Just, although I get asked if I play basketball a lot, I'm not good at it at all. And so because of that, obviously, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go all in on training, and went all in on training at about 15 years old. And about 8 years later, just doing the thing, training a good bit. And then obviously I got a job around 16, and that opened up a lot more doors for me as well. And it was an interesting one for sure.
What was your family dynamic like in those early years?
Yeah, so it was just me, my mom, and my sister. So it was us three, and then my dad lived in Lafayette from about the time I was like, I think about 6 or 7 years old. He moved up here. And then, but the good part is as well, my grandparents lived right next door. So we kind of like Steven shared like the yard in between us. And so I grew up, it wasn't like a huge family. We've never really had like a massive family in Louisiana. I have a lot of family in Georgia, but the family we had was a good one, and so just the five of us down there. And like I said, there wasn't much to do. So spent a lot of time with my grandparents, spent a lot of time with my sister before she went off to college. And yeah, really just the five of us, really.
So what was it about fighting or MMA in particular that made you interested in choosing that over basketball, over these other sports and other options that you had?
I think it was the control. I think it was like since I can remember, I've probably been like a little bit of a control freak, not like a toxically bad control freak sometimes, but definitely a bit of a control freak. And the thing with basketball, it's kind of outside of your control as a player, right? You have a team, you have a coach, and all of those things you have in fighting. But to some degree with basketball, you kind of have to do what you're told, right? we're going to run this play. I need you to be right here and right there. Or when you get the ball, I need you to pass it to that guy. Or I could have my best performance ever, but realistically, if all of my teammates are doing poorly, we're not going to win. And I didn't like the fact that I had minimal control over the outcome and the actual event itself, right? And so with fighting, I recognize, man, this is all on me. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I have coaches who are going to help me. I have teammates who are going to help me. I have a environment, like a family environment. But at the end of the day, it's when you get in there, it's literally just you. If you decide I'm not listening to anything my coach says, I'm just going to fist fight, you can do that. You know what I mean? It's not like he can pull you out and put you on the bench or anything. And so I think it was just the fact that I'm the type of person that I like to take the higher risk a lot of the times. And because of that, a lot of the times, if I take the higher risk, I'd rather it only affect me than affect an entire team. And so just the individuality of it, kind of the self-control of it was, I think, the key thing for me that I was like, this is what I want to do for sure. Now, I didn't know I was going to end up being a fighter. I didn't think that was going to happen, but time leads to weird places sometimes. So,
And so what was that like growing up in a small town like Berwick?
It was surprisingly a lot better than you would expect because it was such a small town. But at the same time, like the area that I lived in, I grew up on a place called 4th Street. In 4th Street, oddly enough, they had an elementary school on the street that I went to, but none of the kids lived on the street. So like where I lived at, I think there was one family, like 2 or 3 houses to our left, but I didn't really know them. So I was actually rather like alone in that little area because I didn't really know anyone within my immediate vicinity. I didn't have any neighbors that were like my friends or whatever. And so whenever I went to that, to train there and stuff, I felt like I had a real like group of friends to some degree. And it felt nice, like being able to share interest with people of my age in a similar place as me. So it was actually really good for me mentally, I think, at the time, especially because I was getting in a lot of trouble at school sometimes. And so it was a good thing, honestly.
When you scroll through social media, it's very obvious that MMA is your life. There's tons of posts, tons of old clips of you in your young days fighting, training, stuff like that. So I've never really followed MMA before. I've seen a couple fights, Dustin Poirier versus McGregor. That was a huge moment for UFC. So I've seen a couple fights here and there, but I've never really followed it. So can you explain the way that the competition works to someone like me?
Yeah, I mean, I can. So I kind of break it down from the beginning, really. So oftentimes, like, you'll start as an amateur, right? And that's the whole, like, you want to go amateur because, like, you can just kind of figure out if this is for you or not. Because there's a lot of people who are like, I want to do that. Then you do it and they're like, I don't want to do that. It's not necessarily fun if you don't love it, right? And so you start off as an amateur and you'll have a couple amateur fights. You'll have a record and stuff, but the amateur fights really don't matter. The whole idea is just to build up experience. And so what'll happen is you'll train and train and train, and then your coach will be like, hey, are you ready to fight? Like, what are we doing? Are you just training for fun? And you accept a fight. Well, what they'll do is they'll find you an opponent from another gym or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of local promotions, and that's generally who you'll fight for. Now, you'll typically have 6 weeks to 8 weeks, maybe longer sometimes, but longer than that puts you prone to injury, and I just don't think it's the best idea. And you go into what's called like a training camp. Now, I don't think having training camps as an amateur makes sense. I think you should just be training constantly. It's not like you shouldn't be sitting on the couch and your coach calls and you go train, right? You shouldn't be training, but you kind of have an increase in intensity. Like, okay, now I'm going to train for this specific night. And so over the next 8 weeks, you have to start lowering your weight usually because you'll have a weight class like 135 pounds, 145, 155 pounds. So you'll start to lower that weight, start cutting weight, eating better, cleaning up, don't eat stuff at night, etc. And then you get to weigh-ins, or usually the week of weigh-ins is a little bit hectic because you might have like 5 pounds, 10 pounds left to lose. So you might have to just do whatever it takes to get to that weight, get in the sauna, sweat it out, and take a bath, do what you got to do. Get the weigh-ins, you weigh in, see your guy for the first time. That's usually my favorite part because like now it's this weird thing. Before you fight a guy, before you even see him in person, they kind of feel like this monster, right? Like, I'm training for this thing, like you're getting ready for like a weird war or something like that, right? But then you see him and you're just a human being. Okay. You're just a normal guy, just like I'm a normal guy. And you weigh in, you see him, and then the next day, man, you show up to the arena, wait your turn. They'll say, hey, you're fighting in 10 minutes. They'll walk you out and, you just go get in a scrap and see what happens, really. It's a crazy sport.
What's that moment like when you walk out into the arena in front of a bunch of people for the very first time? Do you remember the feeling?
It now is the feeling that I constantly chase. I would say I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Don't get me wrong, but there's a certain feeling when you walk out and you recognize like there's no going back. Like you were all in no matter what. And it's probably in my opinion, like one of the best feelings in the world. But the first time I did it was by far the most terrifying thing I've ever done before. I had a poker face. I have a great poker face, but man, I remember when I walked out for the first time and I saw everyone, I'm like, yo, what am I doing right now? This is such a stupid idea. But what you gotta do? What you gotta do? You're just gonna turn around and go back in the locker room? No, you're just gonna go get in a fist fight. And I think once I conquered that feeling the first time, I recognized like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. And so it's the best feeling in the world. You have to channel it correctly.
Nothing about what you just described sounds easy. The prep, the work, the levels of competition, even the actual sport itself is very difficult, I would imagine.
Yeah.
For you personally, what's the motivation behind going through all that hard stuff and fighting?
Yeah. It's a little weird, and the motivation definitely has changed over time for me because initially it was the only thing I liked. Like I enjoyed basketball, but I didn't like basketball because I wasn't good at basketball. I have a tendency to kind of just stick to the things I'm good at and, work on the things I'm not so good at or let someone else do the things I'm not so good at for me. And so because of that, it was the only thing I was good at. I was in school. I did great in school. I went to Lafayette High. I graduated with a 4.0, but I didn't like school whatsoever. I got to college. I didn't like college. I like the social aspect of college, but I just don't like people telling me what to do. I didn't like the fact that I just didn't have much control, and so because of that early on, and because I was exposed to fighting so early, to me, it was the only thing I enjoyed, like I thoroughly liked to do. And so that's why I did it. Now it's weird how it's transpired because I don't really do it financially anymore. That I'm not so concerned about the financial side of fighting, but it's just because I've done it for so long. It's the only thing that I do that gives me that feeling. So the motivation's a weird one, right? It's just because I like it, honestly, and it's not easy. It comes with a lot of brutality. It comes with a lot of highs. It comes with a lot of lows. Injuries. That's one of the ones that gets old pretty quick. But you grow a team, you grow a family, and you just keep doing it just because you love it, really. And if the day comes, and I think there will be a day when that'll come when I don't love fighting anymore. It's just not worth the energy. But until then, I'm just gonna keep cracking on and just see what happens.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because my next question was, how long do you see yourself fighting professionally?
It's a weird one. That's also another one because it's like I could see myself, initially I was like, I'm going to do this until I'm 35, 40 years old, and I don't have that in me anymore. And I know that just because there's other things in life I want to accomplish. I have my company and that's a lot of where my focus goes. And I want to get to the UFC. I believe I'm only like 4 fights away, maybe something like that, especially if I keep getting these finishes. But at the end of the day, it's only worth it to a certain degree, right? And so because the UFC was a childhood dream of mine, that's what I'm pursuing. Like I've always said, like I want to be a UFC fighter. And so you get this close. It's like, well, I might as well keep going, right? But like I said, financially, the fighting doesn't really hold enough weight that it's actually worth that. If I was only pursuing it financially, I would have stopped doing it. But because I want to get to the UFC and because it's just one of those egotistical determinations that I have, like I want to do that, that's the goal. And so we'll get there and we'll kind of just see what happens, and who knows, if I get there, win a fight, I'll just keep doing it, right? Because at the end of the day, it builds a platform. The bigger the platform gets, the more opportunities open up and the more, the goal is generational wealth. And so that can contribute to it. But if the time ever comes where like, it's just not worth the time anymore, I'll just wrap it up. That could be in 3 years, could be in 7 years. I'm just kind of going with the flow. Now just kind of seeing what happens, really.
So before I knew you as the MMA guy, I kind of knew you as the crypto guy. Mm-hmm. There's not too many people who are actually into crypto. It's still kind of a mysterious thing for a lot of people, especially me. So when did crypto become like a big deal?
Yeah, so the crypto thing was a fun one because I kind of accidentally fell into it. So whenever I first got my first job, I was a dishwasher at a place called Dino's Pizza. Don't get me wrong, I love the team at Dino's, but the dishwashing scene is not for me whatsoever, right? And because of that, I was like, man, I just wish that there was ways where I could be making more. And I couldn't just get a raise. I was only 16. I was working on Friday, I would work 8 hours. On Saturday, I would work 12 hours. And on Sunday, I would work 9 hours. And then that was my whole weekend. I didn't have much of a go hang out with friends or go do this on weekends. It was just work, try to get to 30 hours this weekend so I could just buy whatever I wanted. I didn't have bills, but I just like having money, right? And so I was like, well, there's stuff I want to do. But while I was at work, I just kept thinking, man, like, I just wish there was something I could be doing right now that was making me money even while I'm over here. So that kind of started the whole journey for me. Now, this was 2017. If you remember 2017, that's when like drop shipping and like all of these things were popping up, side hustles, like things on YouTube that had never really been discussed, because money is not a topic people can openly generally discuss in public without getting kind of criticized for it. But the YouTube scene opened that door a bit. And so because of that, I started to fall into the whole side hustle, drop shipping, selling merch, doing all types of weird stuff, right? But then I fell into just stocks. And I was like, well, this is simple. That's what I thought. I was like, oh, it's just simple. You just buy this and it goes up and you sell it and you make money. I wish it was that simple, but it opened up the door for me of investment. It opened up the door for me of like, how do I make my money multiply on its own and things like that. And so I started with stocks for 3 years, maybe closer to 2 years. And then about a year into that, I saw something called Bitcoin. I was using an app called Robinhood. And Bitcoin was like, what is Bitcoin? I was like, it looks cool. I'm just buy a little bit of it and just see what happens, because I didn't know any better back then, right? And to me, it was like, well, I don't have any bills. I just put money into random stuff. Now, mind you, Bitcoin at the time was, I think, like $3,000 or $3,500. So I bought a little bit of it, man, and I didn't know what was going on with it. I didn't even look at it or check it. And about a year and a half, maybe about a year later, I can't remember the exact timeline on it. It was up to like maybe 5K or like 6K, and my holding had doubled. Now I put $100 into it, like $200 into it, and my holding had doubled. So I sold it. I was like, I'm done. I was like, I don't know what I did, but I'm out, And but because of that, it opened that door of interest for crypto for me. So then I was like, well, let me actually learn what this is. So time goes on. Now I have a YouTube channel that's based around stocks. I called it My Stock Journey because I was just talking about stocks and how they work. And about 8 to 10 months into my YouTube journey, I was like, we'll talk about a little bit of crypto too. And then since then, it's just like I was documenting my learning process as time went on. And, we're coming up on 4 years later now. It's been a crazy, crazy ride. I'm really diving deep. Now I'm real deep now. But yeah, that was kind of the entry level for me on crypto.
So it started in 2017. Fast forward to 2023. It's been 6 years roughly since crypto has kind of been a thing. People talked about it. There was sort of the rise and fall of Bitcoin. Yep. But for a lot of people, I think it's still this really mysterious thing that is really hard to understand. Yep. So can you explain to someone who maybe doesn't fully understand what it is? Can you summarize how it works?
It's a little hard to summarize, right? But the way that I typically just view it, right? And the easiest way that I can explain it is that it's just a new modern day technology. It's not this. There are currencies associated with it that gets a little bit more confusing, but blockchain as a whole is just a new modern day technology. What you have to consider is whenever you do anything, right? The majority of the things that we do, whether it's, paying for something, shopping for something, trading something, etc., is not public. It's not public detail. You can't see it. You can't access it. You can't really know what's actually happening with most of the interactions you have at places, with companies, with people, etc. Whereas blockchain opens up the ability to take all of that information, be able to take data and store it on what they call a public ledger, which basically just allows you to see what's actually happening. So let me give you an example. So say, for example, if we were doing a payment on blockchain, okay, and I was going to buy your car from you. Best case scenario is, instead of me just trusting you that this car, that you were the first owner of the car or something like that, that car itself, the information about the car maybe could be stored on blockchain, which would allow you to actually see what its history is like. And so that's a very oversimplified version, but blockchain allows you the ability to take information and store it on a public area, or ledger as people call it, allowing for a lot more of decentralization, which just allows people to be able to see what's actually happening with stuff. Now, there's cryptocurrencies. This is when it gets a little bit weird. So on these blockchains, you can create things called cryptocurrencies. Now, these cryptocurrencies are as you could think of it, the currencies of that blockchain. An easy way to think about it is imagine you ever play Subway Surfers?
Yeah.
You remember on Subway Surfers how they had those little tokens? Then you can use it, or Fortnite, they have V-Bucks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Imagine if V-Bucks, you could actually trade them with people for real money. Okay? And the game you're playing is the blockchain. That's the only way I can explain it without getting really weirdly technical. But quite simply, it's just a currency that can be traded amongst individuals or invested in, because the value typically goes up as blockchains get bigger. I know I didn't do the best job for a sixth grader, right? But I think that's a decent explanation.
So crypto is a big video game.
That's a great game. That's basically, yeah. And there are games in crypto, but that's the whole story for another.
I think a lot of people probably have a negative perception of crypto and blockchain, all these sort of like buzzwords that people probably talk about in the finance world. What are some of those misconceptions that people have about crypto, but they aren't necessarily true?
Sure. The biggest one I would say is that crypto is a scam. There are for sure scams and scammers in crypto. It's riddled with them. And the issue with it is, like, if you think about traditional finance, if you take the TradFi space or traditional finance space and turn it into the Wild Wild West, in which the people actually control it, now we're in crypto, right? And so there are scammers and they have the ability to do that. Anyone can create a blockchain. Anyone can create a crypto. It's not one of those things where, like, in the stock market, you can only really have a publicly traded stock if you have the right connections or if you have enough money or things like that. You can start a cryptocurrency today. We can start one in this room, right? And so the thing is, because of that, you can never know who the good actors and the bad actors are. There's more good than bad in crypto, but the bad outweighs the good because the media, and I'm not going to become one of those tinfoil guys on the pod right now, but the media is heavily geared towards negativity, at least in my opinion. I think whatever is negative gets the most engagement. And so a lot of the times you see them, kind of hone in favor on the negativity that does encapsulate within crypto sometimes. And then obviously that puts a negative connotation within just normal people that, oh, crypto's a scam, right? So as I said, there are scams for sure, but a lot less than just good, in my opinion. So.
What are your thoughts on the future of crypto? Some people think it's a total waste of time. Yeah. Some people think it literally is going to replace like actual currency. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the future of crypto?
I believe that it is going to have a much bigger impact on the world than anyone is really expecting at this point. Now, the reason I believe that is because it's applicable to just about anything. So, for example, there are a lot of maybe hospitals at this given point who are now keeping like their data secure and store on blockchains because it is more easily accessible. It's easily transferable, things of that nature. And it's a ledger in which, if accessed by, franchisees or whatever, they can see the information, things like that. Now, on another note, the gaming world, crypto gaming, we're actually starting to see games use cryptos within them, use NFTs and things like that, which is a whole nother conversation. But they're using things like that into where, for example, imagine, you ever play CSGO?
Yeah.
Imagine this, that skin that you had. You remember how you could actually like trade skins and do stuff like that?
And they're worth like a ton of real money.
Right. Now, the cool thing is there's like these things called NFTs in which you could take that skin and it's an NFT. So it's not just a skin in the game, it's this NFT that you can trade with anyone. Now, a lot of games are now implementing that within them. So think about if you're playing a game in which you have gear, right? Like a helmet or a chest piece or legs or whatever it may be. You can turn that into an NFT and then trade it to other players. And so a lot of these games are starting to implement that. So where they have their own marketplaces, their own ecosystems. You actually own the things you find in the game. Then they're also taking cryptocurrencies and injecting that in the game. And in my opinion, because the gaming world has been so dead recently, like it's just, I was a former gamer. I don't really have time anymore, but I've noticed the gaming world, after Fortnite, it kind of just died off, right? And I believe that the gaming sector is always going to be of importance. There's always going to be people who want to play games. And I think if you can truly have it into which people can go on these games and grind and hustle and actually make money, I think it's going to take over the gaming industry. That's what I personally believe. So it's from that perspective. Obviously, we know that from a more broad perspective, it's something that I don't believe is going anywhere. We're seeing governments adopt it. We're seeing governments buying cryptos at this point. So you think of El Salvador, you think of places with extremely high inflation rates. They're purchasing crypto because it can be a store of value. It's not always a store of value, but it can be a store of value. The U.S. government's deciding, I think they're going to do it, but they're deciding whether or not they're going to create their own version of a digital currency. I think we're moving away from cash as a general society. We don't use cash as much. We go from cash to credit cards to now Venmo. You can tap your phone, and I think eventually that goes to just full-blown digital currency one day. And obviously, considering that is likely the progression we're going to, crypto plays a significant role in that. So, I think crypto is going to be the future. I just think it's so early that people are skeptical, and they should be, because it can be a crazy place sometimes.
Several years ago, you jumped on this crypto thing. It was super niche, and you took it to YouTube, where honestly, people on YouTube right now love niche things. Like, you can go in a direction that isn't necessarily mainstream or entertaining, but if you find that core audience, you can really build a huge following. Yep. And that's exactly what you did. Your channel has over 70,000 subscribers. How did you do that?
Consistency. It's really that simple. It was, So at this point, just to kind of put a little context, at this point, I managed, my company and I managed over 25 YouTubers. And there's one consistent thing that generates the results, building a core community. It's staying true to who you are, because it's so easy. It's so easy to fall into narratives, right? I've seen so many people who are just normal guys that I came up with. Then whenever like the Jake Pauls and all these kind of loony guys pop off, then they decide that's what I want to be. I want to kind of be belligerent. I want to be crazy. I want to garner that attention. And I don't believe that to be true, or a good thing, because people can quite clearly see who's being true and who's not, right? And so if you just start being a kind of like I said, belligerent and being crazy and stuff like that out of nowhere, people will notice that, in my opinion. And so I think people do prefer, if you go look back at my old videos, although I am better, right, at talking on camera, or I can kind of articulate what I want to say a little better, I still say the same type of things. I act the same way. And I think people relate to that. Now, on another note, it's from the work side of things. So that's a personal side. From a work side of things, it's just a consistency. People have attachments that they make. And I believe that when someone can consistently see you and see the value you're providing, they become attached and you build a community. It's not really that difficult. It's just a lot of the time people can get a little bit thrown off by the work it takes. And sometimes the journey looks different than other people. For my first 9 months of posting on YouTube, I got to 800 subscribers. It took me 10 months to hit 1,000 subscribers. And then 3 months later, I had 40,000 subscribers. It was almost immediate. Now, why was that? Well, it was because crypto immediately just kind of popped up, right? There was this thing called Safe Moon, which total sham. But I talked about it. I liked it at the time because one, was a bit naive to what was actually happening. And two, I just was excited about the opportunity that it presented because it was bringing so many people into one place. And so because I kind of jumped on that train within the very, first couple of days, first couple of weeks, as people came to the space looking for it, I was there providing it. Piece of me's like, dang, that's a sucky way to start, because now it turned out to be this whole thing that just didn't go well in the long term. But at the end of the day, it allowed me to kind of put my knowledge on the table and show, look, I know what I'm talking about and I know how to present these things. And then that helped me build a core community to go forward. So consistency, staying true to yourself, and just absolutely taking advantage of any type of excitement that correlates to what you talk about.
I started my YouTube channel 3 years ago. And so I totally understand now just like how much work actually is involved in it. Yep. Because when you start a channel, you are basically in charge of everything. Like, you make the content, you edit it, you post it, you promote it. Like, you really have to be the person who is in charge of everything. So I understand now how much work is involved with it. From your perspective, how hard was it on the back end to grow a following that big? Because 70,000 subscribers, followers, however you want to say it, no matter what platform you're on, that's a lot of people who are tuning into what you have to say. So how hard was it behind the scenes to build a following like that?
In my opinion, and this is a little weird, it wasn't that hard. And the reason it wasn't that hard, the work was hard. The effort I was putting in was hard. But the actual building an audience part wasn't hard. And the reason being is because I actually liked what I was talking about and I cared about what I was talking about. And whenever you have just a perfect combination, I will admit it was lucky timing. I don't believe in luck per se. I believe if you constantly do something over and over again and put yourself in a position in which a good opportunity is there that you can take advantage of, that's luck, right? So I do believe it was lucky timing that I was just so happen to be talking about this one thing as everyone was looking for it. But the fact that I really cared about what I was talking about, that I liked what I was talking about, I could sit and scour the internet and find things to talk about on my channel. The fact that I could do all of those things at the same time that niche was growing, it allowed me to see a lot of growth fast. And so it's definitely harder today, especially in the niche that I'm in. Like, growing a channel is much more difficult. But at the same time, I believe everything in life is cyclical. I believe there's the ebbs and the flows of just about anything. And so just because right now it's like not the best time ever, the people who position themselves correctly, when the time does come for that market to grow, they'll be the ones who are going to take advantage of it. So the process of growing isn't that difficult. The work you have to put in is difficult.
What's crazy about YouTube and just the internet in general is that people have actually earned full-time incomes off of it. It kind of blows my mind if I think about it too hard. And like, the ability to scale that income beyond full-time into like multi-millionaires is just insane. Yeah. For you, when did it make sense to go all in on YouTube?
It was a very, very quick decision that I made. So in January of 2020, obviously the pandemic started, right? Or that was when it really started to like everything was like shutting down. We had to leave school. It was crazy. We didn't leave school till May, but January was like when it first kicked off. And that's when I decided like, okay, I'm going in on this. I'm going to start making videos. A year later, I had maybe, like I said, 1,000, 2,000 subscribers, somewhere around there. I was making probably like $20 a month from AdSense or whatever. And it was okay. But at the end of the day, it's not going to get you really anywhere, especially now. And I was also working at a place called Buckle. So when I turned 18, I actually started working at a place called Buckle, just doing sales. I was selling jeans. I can sell some jeans, by the way. But I was not happy. I was like, there has to be more to this and to just life in general than what I'm doing right now. Right. And so I started to really take the YouTube side of things a lot more serious in the sense like, okay, we have to absolutely double down on this. Right. And so time goes on and I start looking at it like, okay, I need to treat this like a business. It's not just a hobby anymore. It's not just me trying to just have fun with this. Like, I'm done with this. People just telling me like, you know, being on a work floor and be like, can I go to the bathroom? No, not right now. Is bewildering to me. It's like, no, I'm going to go, you know? And so I was like, I have to double down on this. I have to put in the effort. And so time goes on. And as I start to treat it like a business, I start to look at it and implement business strategy. Like, okay, I need to figure out the sponsored thing. I'm going to open up my own like private community. It's called a Patreon, which at the time was something that people looked at also like you're selling a course. And I don't think courses are bad whatsoever. I just think that the wrong people selling the wrong course is a terrible thing, right? But, you know, I put together a Patreon and I started looking at sponsorships and stuff like that. And I was like, the moment I can replace half of what I'm making right now at work with YouTube, I'm going to quit. And so at work at the time, I was making like, I think like $1,800 a month or something like that. And I was like, the moment I get to about $1,000 a month, I'm leaving. And it was funny how everything happened because I had already stopped going to college. It was just kind of a mental decision, like I'm just not going back. There's nothing that was going to convince me I'm not going back. And I hadn't talked to anyone really about it enough. I just stopped going. So I was like, I'm really in this. And what would happen is that when everything happened with crypto, when everyone flooded into it, the whole Safe Moon thing popped off and everything really started to garner excitement, my income just absolutely took off. Like my little private community, which was like $15 a month, at one point hit like 600 people were in it. And I was like, and this was in a span of like 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, I'm done. And so I literally called my boss and I was like, yo, D, like, I love you. Thank you for everything. You haven't made the schedule for the next 2 weeks yet. Just don't include me on it. I'm not coming back. And that was it. I just left. It was within the span of a month I decided to leave. But then funnily enough, right after I quit my job, my channel got hacked. And I lost my channel, lost everything. And I was like, that's not what I was expecting. Quit your job, drop out of school, channel gets hacked, you lose everything, you're back to square one. So I spent a month building up a second channel, then I get my first channel back. And then that's when everything just takes off from there when I got it back. Because what happened was while I got it hacked, I had built up friends in the scene who had like 100K subscribers or 50K subscribers. They all shouted my new channel out. They're like, hey, go support him, he just lost everything, blah, blah, blah. So when I got my channel back, because YouTube finally helped me, all those people who came to my new channel went to my second channel. And then it was just a perfect timing thing, really. So long story short, it was very fast.
If you could do a very fast 60-second audit of my channel and be brutally honest from what you've seen, because we talk about this often, give me a super fast 60-second audit of my channel.
I like your channel a lot because your content is actually really good and you actually have conviction that what you're talking about is true, right? And so like when you give your opinion, you're not giving someone else's opinion, you're giving your own opinion. And that's what I've always liked whenever I've seen your videos, because obviously the video quality is great, the thumbnails are great, the titles are even better, right? And that's not hard to do, like the avatar thing. That's how it works, right? But obviously the main critique I would have is just that the market you're in is, although niche, and niche is good, sometimes niche can be so niche that the growth feels very slow and that can be a little bit demoralizing. And so I believe if you were to kind of like what we're doing right now, like take your skills and take the things you're good at and take the experience that you've had over the last couple of years and implement that into a market that has a little bit more opportunity like we're doing right now, I think that it opens up a lot of doors for growth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for not, totally hurting my feelings.
No, I would if I could.
No, that's cool. I like getting feedback from people because I have, my family watches the channel. I have certain friends. Not everyone watches it. But yeah, I've been doing movie related content for the past 3 years, ever since I started it. Yeah. And I've enjoyed it. I'm not getting rid of movies from my life totally, but I'm in a season right now where I kind of want to try something new, try something different. And so this sort of content that we're doing right now, just having a conversation, feels more authentic to me. So I'm glad that you said that. I feel a little affirmed in
Sure.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could go back and tell yourself a piece of advice before you started your YouTube channel, you know, across these years, you've learned so much about YouTube, the industry, making content. What's something that you would go back and tell yourself?
I would probably tell myself two things. Okay. Thing number one is that it's not going to be what you expect, right? And that's just as simple as it is. Because I feel like we all have this honeymoon phase with just about anything. You're right. We've seen it. I'm not married, but in terms of like marriage, in terms of just playing sports, in terms of playing a new game, you're always going to have that honeymoon phase where you're obsessed with it. You're in love with it. Like it is the absolute best thing ever, but that does not last forever. And it's just quite simply, you will have ups, you will have downs. My dad always tells me, don't get too high in the highs, don't get too low in the lows, right? Because at the end of the day, everything comes back to some type of average. And so the way that I would tell myself is like, listen, you just need to be consistent. As good as it may get and as bad as it may get. When it starts getting really good, don't go spending crazy money, which gladly I didn't. When it gets really bad, don't start panicking like the world is ending. You just have to keep putting in the work. Now, the second thing that I would say for sure is don't be afraid of a team. Because when I left team sports, I had it on my mind that I'm going to do this on my own. Like, I knew I could, right? And I did for years and years and years. But at the same time, when you're not open to help, when you're not open to partnering with people, when you're not open to delegating certain things because you just think you're the only one on the earth who can do it, which is ridiculous, right? Whenever you're doing that, you're limiting your potential. And so just recently, my company, what we decided to do was, it was just me for a year and a half. And I met a couple of guys and I was like, you know what, let's do this together. And since then, because we did that, we absolutely exploded, right? And so I would definitely tell myself those two things. It's not going to be what you expect. Just be ready for that. And don't be afraid of a team just because you like to do things on your own.
You're the CEO of the Hill Growth Agency. So you're a young entrepreneur. You have your own company, which is pretty cool. I mean, you're how old?
22.
22. Yeah. Not a lot of 22-year-olds are running their own stuff right now. So what are some of the challenges, or what would you say is the most difficult part of running your own company at 22 years old?
Trusting yourself. I've always, a buddy of mine, Austin Swallow, he made a post a couple of years ago and it stuck with me since then. But he said, I always knew I would be here, but I never thought I would be here. In a sense that I knew I could do this. Like deep down in my heart, like I knew I could do this, but the idea that I could do it or that I would do it was kind of like that's crazy. Sometimes I feel like that about the UFC still. It's like, I know I can get to the UFC. I know I can. But it's like when I get there, I'm going to be like, dang, I really did it. And so, but with that, with that said, it's that you have to trust yourself. It's not like school. In school, they give you the book, they give you the lecture, they give you everything you need for the most part, right? I've had a few classes where things were on the test that were no way taught to us. There's no way, right? And that's kind of how it feels. It's kind of one of those things where it's like you have a problem that you need to solve, and the only person who can solve it is you. Now, the good part about it is obviously I have a team, so it's more of a group effort. I was watching a podcast literally on the way here, which is funny. A guy named Luke Belmar, and he was like, when we're in school and someone helps you solve a problem, it's cheating. But in real life, you have a life hack or something like that, right? Or it's encouraged because it gets you further. And so the good part about, owning the company, running the company is that I have the help now to make those decisions that I may struggle to trust myself with. But at the end of the day, trusting myself to make those correct decisions has always been one of those struggles. But as it's getting further, as we're getting more successful, we are the biggest influencer management company in the world of crypto. Like on the YouTube scene, there's not a bigger one. And so because I am kind of successfully, going like step after step after step, milestone, I'm building up more credibility within myself that I trust myself more and more. But early days, it was like, dang, am I making the right decision? I don't know. And so that was definitely a struggle. And you kind of have that imposter syndrome because it's like, you're successful and you're doing well, but it's like, man, I'm just freestyling right now, So that was definitely one of the biggest tasks that I had. But it's definitely easing up now these days.
There's so many other things that you could be spending your time on at 22 years old. I'm just thinking about what I was doing at 22, like fresh out of college, didn't really know what field I wanted to go into long term or, spend my life doing. So why would you start your own company?
It's just the dreams and the aspirations. Don't get me wrong, I had a crazy college run. I was only in college for 2 years, but I absolutely had a crazy college run, did some crazy stuff. And the thing about it is it put me in a position to early on recognize that it just wasn't the life that I wanted to live. You know, like I kind of got my fix really soon and really early on because like, man, this isn't for me. The partying and the girls and all this was great, but it got old very fast. And so to me, it's like, what I've always personally aspired to be was like, I want to have my own family one day. I want to put them in a kind of a advantageous position in which their kids can do better and their kids can do better, et cetera. And so I've always wanted that family man thing, you know? And because of that, it was very easy for me to recognize that if I really want to give myself the best odds of just being a good dad, being a good husband and a good father and things of that nature, like I have to start early. I don't have to, but I would give myself a better shot at doing that successfully. And that's all that's really mattered to me, right? So yeah, I could be doing all types of stuff. I still do travel. Me and Adelaide, we go a whole bunch of places. We see all those types of things, but we do that together. And I spend the majority of my time doing working, putting myself in a better and better position so that when the time comes, I'm as prepared as possible to just live that average family life. Because funnily enough, after everything that I have accomplished, that's what I still aspire for. So it's really easy motivation, you know, at the end of the day.
What skills are needed to be an entrepreneur?
Okay. Skills, I'll say some skills and some traits, because I feel like there are certain traits that you are born with but can also be worked on, and then there's skills that are developed, right? So in terms of traits, you have to have a bit of a knack for risk. You know, if you're one of those people who just will never take a risk, you will never get anywhere. It's just that simple. Consistency and stability are kind of the one thing that can kill a strong, fast-growing business. Because if you're not willing to make those changes, you're not really willing to open doors of opportunity. Now, there are some businesses that you can just do for 30, 40, 50 years. Like you could go clean pools for 40 years and you'll do great in 40 years, but that's not the mindset that I have. My mindset is I want this thing to move, right? And so having the knack for risk and the ability and the openness for change are two traits that I think are crucial. Now, in terms of skills, it really just depends, right? Sales, I think it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're selling, right? Whether you're selling a service or selling a product or selling a platform, or I won't say selling yourself, that sounds kind of crazy, but like any of these things, right? You have to have the sales skills. You have to have conviction and let people know like this is valuable and this is worth it for you, right? Sales, number one. Number two, in terms of skills, is delegation. And I would put organization within the same kind of category. Delegation in the sense that, okay, how do I delegate either this person to this task or this time to this task, right? Because the tasks need to get done. Don't care how you get them done. If you have 10 things to get done, you must get them done. So you either have to delegate your own time to that task or delegate someone else's time to that task. And then lastly, of course, organization in the sense that if you're running around willy-nilly, just don't know what's happening, the likelihood of you being able to efficiently complete the task necessary to grow the business is almost impossible, right? And so you have to put in the time to learn, like, okay, how do I organize this? And that's what I struggled with the most at first. Was like, man, I used to just do stuff all day. And then I'll look back and go, what have I done all day long? It could be as simple as just having a notepad. It's like, okay, I did these 10 things. And go look back at the week like, okay, I accomplished this, forgot about that. I'm going to do that. And so, yeah, I would definitely say sales, delegation, organization. Three skills, but they're rather easy to learn.
There may be someone listening to this episode who they see your story and they see themselves and they're like, I can do this too. What would you say to someone who may be interested in wanting to start their own company, but they may be a little hesitant?
The time is now. It's quite simple as that, because it's easy to become hesitant because you're like, well, I will do that this day, or I will do that when I get this. But the likelihood is it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? There's always going to be another excuse. There's always going to be another reason as to why it needs to wait a year or wait another 2 years. We don't know who has another year left. This could be my last day. You know what I mean? And so if there's things that I have on my heart, I'm going to do this. I just believe the time is now. You don't have the time to wait. Because like I said, hopefully not. God granted not. But at the end of the day, if you only got 2 years left, you better get moving. You better start doing and accomplishing some of the things, because you can leave an imprint and you can leave an impact in the next 2 years that changes the lives of everyone around you, even if you don't get to kind of reap the rewards of it yourself. Or do you just want to wait those 2 years out and then something happens to you and you never truly accomplish the things you wanted to because you were waiting for a day that never came, you know? And so that's a little bit more of like a you know, one like that. But at the end of the day, on another note, in my opinion, the younger you are and the least responsibility you have, right? So if there's like a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old watching this, I think the best time to pursue things of this nature is like when you have the least responsibility. And the reason being is because the more responsibilities you have, the more you feel the need to not make that big jump, right? Like, I don't want to jump from here to there because I don't want to mess up and then risk my kid or risk my wife or risk my dog, whatever, right? Whereas when you're younger, when you have that time like I did during the pandemic, I'm a college kid with no responsibilities whatsoever. I started it because if I make a mistake, I just restart. If I do this, I just restart. And the beautiful thing about it is people are so scared to commit to things because they don't want to fail. What I always say is failure isn't bad because failure doesn't mean you're restarting. Failure means you're going to try again, but with all the prior knowledge. So yes, although you are starting from ground zero, you're not necessarily starting from ground zero because you have all the knowledge you took from that last try. And that likelihood of you failing again the same way is really small. Like if you fail the same exact way 2 times, it's like, okay, that's a you problem. You know what I mean? But the likelihood is here, if you recognize like, this is the mistake I made, now you know that mistake led you to failure. You're likely to not do it again. That means your likelihood for success goes up. And so to me, it's like when you have the least responsibilities, when you have time on your hands, when you're young, it's just time to go for it. And even if you're not, like I said, you never know how much time you have left. If you're 40 years old or 30 years old, 20 years old, it doesn't matter. You might only have 2-3 years left. Make an impact while you can, not whenever you feel like it, So that's that for sure.
That's good. I think people at any age can walk away with something from that. So I appreciate you. What's next for Tyler Hill?
We'll see. I'm dealing with I had an injury. Not going to go too deep into it because I know they're watching. They're looking for it. But I had a bit of an injury that I'm healing up and I'm getting ready for, but I'll be back in a couple of months. So from the fight scene, we'll kind of see what's up. Right now I'm busy with my business. And so obviously that's where my main focus is, but there's been a little bit of chitter chatter in the fight world. And, sometimes you just got to put a plug in it. So we'll see. But in terms of business, just keep growing. Like I mentioned before, right now we are the biggest management company within this, like the YouTube, Twitter, any of that scene in the world of crypto. And crypto is $1 trillion market. And right now we're growing. We have millions and millions of subscribers amongst those that we manage. And by continuously growing, we're releasing new products, we're releasing new services. We're building and building. We're adding more people to the team. We're adding more influencers that we're managing. We're opening more doors of opportunity. And so because of that, I don't know where that's going to lead us, right? We're just going. I don't have a goal. I'm not really saying like I want to get there. I'm just one of those type of people like, let's just run with it and see what happens. And so the main focus right now is just to see, okay, how many doors can we open? How many opportunities can we take advantage of? And how much growth can we do in order to kind of not just feed ourselves, but feed all of those around us? And obviously, if that changes a community, if that changes one person, just changes our own lives, I think that's a win. And so at this point, we're just chasing success in any means possible. So
I love following your story. I keep up with you on Instagram. I just love seeing the MMA stuff, the crypto stuff. It's just fun following your story and learning more about you through this conversation. So thanks for being here. Absolutely. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.